Unlearning go-to-market. So we've invited you here today to talk about this subject. And go-to-market has always been a complicated subject. As a founder, you have an idea for a business, you start to create it, you build a product. You might get your first few clients through people that you know, but ultimately you're going to get to that eventual point where you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning and go, how do I build this business? How do I get new clients? How do I get strangers to take an interest in what we're doing and potentially buy our product or service from us? So today I'm going to speak a little bit about how we approach this at oAT with new clients, primarily in the 0 to 1 phase. So you might have your first few clients, again, through networks and personal connections. But when you start to ask yourself that question, how do we help founders actually push things forward and ultimately get strangers to know about what we do and get them interested in what we do? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, a little bit about what we're seeing in the market and how things are changing in 2026. And hopefully you'll take away from this a few ideas that you can experiment with and bring into your own go-to-market as well. So just a little bit about me. I'm Joshua, head of GTM of All Trades. I've been working for 7 years now on go-to-market at the 0 to 1 stage. So former founder of my own company, Ordemic, which not only was in edtech and sold into B2C and B2B. Um, we've also, my experience in the past working with oAT in multiple different startups has also led me to figure out how to sell into other B2B, other B2C areas, different decision makers such as HR leaders, in-house lawyers, institutions, universities, farmers applying for RFPs and tenders and things like that, as well as even brick and mortar businesses and VCs as well. And at oAT, what we do is we embed generalist operators, not just on the GTM side, but in other parts of the business, into startups, nonprofits, and enterprise sometimes as well, to help them really execute without hiring a full-time person. So the question every founder asks, how do I get more customers? For me, and the way I look at it and the way we look at it at oAT, is it always splits into two problems. 50% on the awareness side. So most of the people you serve have never heard of you. How can you hold their attention for 5 seconds? And the other 50% is interest. Once you have those 5 seconds, are you saying something to them that actually makes them act, that meets them where they're at? And ultimately, a lot of go-to-market is about controlling the uncontrollable. How people feel about your product, how they compare it to the alternatives. And as a former founder myself and working with founders on a day-to-day basis, it's a really easy thing in some way to ignore sales and marketing because it doesn't feel controllable. It's easier to maybe focus on product, finance, UX, brand. All of it is, it can be more fun than sales and marketing and lets you talk about what you love. But sales, it's the opposite. It's a series of no's. Each one feels personal. It's unpredictable. It's an emotional area of the business. And more often than not, the default of the people that you're speaking to is indifference. And that's a really, really hard thing to do, especially when you put so much of your heart and soul into what you're building as a founder. So what you want to try to get to at the 0 to 1 stage as a founder is how can we control what we do that can give us a predictable outcome? So this is the way we look at it. If we do X activity, we can get Y amount of customers. Each Y brings in a certain amount of revenue, and the activity costs X to acquire, the CAC. To hit the revenue goal, we need this many X, which will cost this much in total. If you're able to build experiments that get you to understand how you can get this at a small, with a small sample size, you can then figure out a way to scale that. You can take that as an argument to investors, to VCs, to potential partners that you have a predictable way to grow this business. So that's on the control move side. On the other side, you've got the big bets. So these are things that might be less controllable and really can't predict what the outcome is going to be. So for example, this might be, blogs, content marketing to some degree, podcasts, things like that. If you get onto a podcast that's popular within your industry, you can't predict whether one person or 50,000 people is going to listen to that, and more so whether you're going to get people come to you after that. It's worth doing both of these at the same time in the early stage because you want to understand how you can control growth or as much as you can control growth, and B, whether you can really hit some home runs at the same time. So that's part of the awareness side. On the interest side, to keep it very simple, there are many ways that you can do a value proposition and looking into your ICP, etc. But the way we like to do it here is keep it really, really simple so it stays flexible and you can change it over time as you go out into the market and learn things. So these 5 lines, I think, really comprise a full value proposition that you can adjust as you learn new things in the market. If we help X, your ICP, your potential decision maker and company type, solve X, the problem that you're fundamentally solving, by doing X for them, what your product actually does to do it, they will choose it over X. This is dealing with the competition side, whether that's a real competitor live in the market, or even if it's just a spreadsheet that your ICP exists with that you're competing against, or an old internal process. And number 5 is because our solution X, how do you differentiate fundamentally against that competitor that your ICP is using in some way? So a really good way to just keep it simple and allow you to flexibly move and experiment with each one of these lines as you develop the messaging as well. And just going back to the control side of things, on the awareness side of things, normally what the control side looks like in terms of you can translate that into outbound in many ways. So email, LinkedIn, calls, letters, direct messages, in person. Think about, if we send 100 emails to hospitals in Atlanta, 10 reply, 5 meet, 1 buys. You can take from that if we need 10 to buy this quarter, we need to send 1,000 emails. And then you can figure out how to scale that and make it a predictable channel. On the inbound side, content, referrals, partners, word of mouth, LLM SEO, or otherwise called AEO, which is big at the moment. You can do a lot of things there, but you're never quite sure as to when it's going to come in. Again, it's still worth doing that stuff. And I think Caleb will talk a little bit more about that because they're some of the really big bets and can eventually bring you some home runs as well. Another thing to look at on the awareness side is, is the problem actually on the mind? Signals are really difficult, and a lot of people working on the go-to-market and sell side oversell how much they can get signal from a buyer, because ultimately it's so hard to find. Let's say if you sell to founders, for example, it's so hard to understand what is on their mind at this time. So if there's a way to find those signals, it might be different for your business. It's a great way to look at things, but it only gets you a certain amount of the way there. Some signals, for example, that we might use at oAT, again, we sell into founders, nonprofits, enterprise, potentially hiring activity if people are looking for people within go-to-market or operations. That might be a signal that they're looking to solve the problem that we ultimately solve. Fundraising, if they just raise money, a really interesting one. The problem is with that, again, I'm sure you'd probably know this as founders as well, as soon as you raise a little bit of money, you have an influx of direct messages on LinkedIn, etc., because everyone is building off that same signal. So more important than that is how can you actually create your own signals? How can you maybe creatively use content to bring people in the long term and let you know that the problem that you're solving is currently on their mind? So what you eventually want to get to is this framework, which is as to run an experiment, which is we believe that by communicating X, that original value prop I shared, to a number of your potential customers through X channel, we can achieve a certain outcome, replies, meetings, etc. Because X, again, looking back at that competitive differentiation that you have. If you're able to get this before you run every experiment into this small written down format, you're then able to test that and actually understand in the long term whether you can scale it. So what that might look like in practice, let's say an early stage B2B SaaS selling into hospitals, for example. By communicating that their patients are already on social media, they now have a compliant zero effort way to reach them. This is a hospital company a health company that works with hospitals to engage their patients via social media. If they communicate that to 50 hospitals in Illinois through email outreach, they can achieve 10 demos and 5 paying enterprise customers because over 80% of providers know they need a social presence, time, and compliance are the only blockers. Now, if you go into an experiment with this idea, thinking that you can do this, things might change. The differentiation that might be relevant to those hospitals in Illinois might change. The potential of the 10 demos or 5 paying enterprise subscribers, you might find that you have less success or more success. But if you get this at a small volume, then you can start to understand how you can scale that to not just 50 hospitals, but to the 50,000 hospitals in the States or in the country, etc. So you can figure out how to scale that. And right now, that's where AI comes in. AI can help you kind of think about the positioning here and everything else, of course. But in the long term, you want to understand how you can actually use AI skills, etc., to continue to scale what you found is working in those initial experiments. One thing that I'd like to talk about that I'm thinking a little bit more about, especially now with AI and the marketing side of things. A few years ago, the idea of a T-shaped marketer was a big thing in startups. So this is Buffer's example of it. You kind of have the base knowledge at the top, the marketing foundation, and the channel expertise as well. And they defined a T-shaped marketer as someone who has a professional who has broad working knowledge across many areas of digital marketing, combined with deep expert level skills in 1 to 3 specific channels or disciplines. In the last few years, that's completely changed because this, from the perspective of a marketer, if you could demonstrate you had this, it used to be a major differentiator. Now, with AI, everyone in this room is a T-shaped marketer. Everyone can tap into Claude, ChatGPT, etc., to do pretty much everything on this list that you see. And thinking more about that, you know, how do you find alternative angles and alternative ways to get in front of your potential clients when all of your competitors, everyone right now is asking for their attention via these different channels? So a few thoughts here. Again, a model, execution got really cheap in the last few years. A model gives anyone passable competence in every box in that T-shaped marketer diagram I just showed. Deciding what's worth doing is the part only you can do. And this brings me to my next point, which is that kind of evergreen advice from Y Combinator, which is do things that don't scale. It's more important than ever. And anything AI can scale is the default now. So what you really want to do as a founder, especially in those early stages, is look at channels like in-person, gate-kept communities, partner ecosystems, doing unscalable services and unscalable customer success to get the interest, to get the awareness of your potential buyer. And then if you find something works over there, use AI to actually help you scale doing it. So make it easier for you to actually do that at volume rather than looking at, how you can just set something on automate, on AI, and it will bring people in naturally, because that's very, very difficult to do now because so many people are doing it. Try and find those things that are not scalable and then use AI to actually just help you do it in terms of your workload. A few other things that we've seen, pilots are a new vanity metric, basically, at least in the case of B2B. Around 95% of enterprise AI initiatives never convert. And a big reason of that is because there's a new competitor in town, which is build in-house. 3 or 4 years ago, when you might be selling something B2B, maybe it would come up that they're looking at building it in-house instead. But in reality, it never worried salespeople because they knew it was a pipe dream. The amount of work it would take to build that product, except to manage it, etc., would be too difficult. Right now, a lot of B2B solutions are coming against that. And it's important to treat pilots as a new vanity metric because they may be looking at, they might be doing a pilot to understand how they want to build it in-house. They're always going to be comparing it against that when it comes to actually closing it. So it's very important not to get too lost into pilots, and that when you do, make sure that it has a clear owner, a clear decision maker, and metrics are agreed before you start that pilot. It's very, very important on the B2B side. And another thing I think that's really, really interesting and to think about is, personalization a few years back was important. Right now, it's completely redundant because it is easier than ever to personalize something. And to some degree, it's made it ineffective. But I think a really interesting way to look at things when you're thinking about messaging and positioning is how to be interestingly wrong. So having a take that a prospect wants to argue with, again, to really pique their interest, to pique their awareness, and to try and build that discussion up front. And yeah, to make the case of how you're looking at things and how you're looking at your particular product and business as well. So I will end there for now and pass over to Caleb.
Thank you, Joshua. Hey, everybody, I'm Caleb with oAT. Just a quick background. I have over a decade working on content teams and work with early stage startups, really getting content operations from 0 to 1. So building the whole thing. I really wanted to talk about today sort of the playbook that I've been using. Like Joshua said, in his part, there's a lot of things that are controllable. Oftentimes with content marketing, it feels uncontrollable. And I think there's a reason there that's super different, right? With a lot of outbound, you get to test both the recipient and the message. You get to pick your ICP, figure out who that is, what their pain points are. With content marketing, you only get one of those variables, right? You can only choose the message. You can't choose who listens to your podcasts or who reads your blog post or anything like that. It feels uncontrollable, but I hope by the end of this, you have a little sense of how to actually control it and get something out of it. So, kind of the three parts of the playbook I want to talk through um, is first listening, understanding what the media ecosystem looks like, figuring out how to join that with your own voice and your own things to say, and then how to amplify that, how to be heard. Okay, so to just compare and contrast really quickly, like regular outbound versus a content shop, there are some similarities, but there's a lot of differences. Uh, so like I said up top, with targeting, with outbound, you get to figure out and decide and test through who's the recipient and what's the message. With content marketing, right? The message is the only filter that you get. Um, and then with volume too, right? If you send 1,000 cold emails, that's probably better than sending 100. It scales linearly with input and output. Like Josh alluded to earlier, with content marketing, this is totally reverse, right? You can send 100 LinkedIn posts. They may drive no traction or awareness, but you have one thing that goes viral and suddenly you have a ton of inbounds. And then the third real major difference here is just the time scale, right? With a lot of outbound and other parts of your GTM motion, you can really understand and test and iterate fairly quickly, right? Like you get feedback, you can understand it, and you can pivot or double down. Content marketing is not like that. It's takes time to compound and it's slow, but it does build over time. And I want to walk through later just some signals that you can start collecting even initially to help understand where things are going. Okay, so the first part of the playbook here is really understanding the media ecosystem. I think a lot of people talk about like every company is a media company now, and you need to figure out the same way you do with, how is your product different? How is your media going to be different, and how is it going to stand out? So the major component of that is understanding what your ICP is reading, right? What are the things that they listen to? What are they hearing? What are the arguments that they're having? You really want to know the heartbeat of that diet. Traditionally, that used to be really difficult, right? That would take weeks and weeks of research and manually scrolling through LinkedIn and listening to podcasts and trying to understand that, and still only scratching the surface of what's actually going on. With AI, that's changed a ton, right? Where in an afternoon, you can synthesize pretty much everything out there and understand it. Um, what hasn't changed though is really understanding who your buyer is. What Josh was talking about is I think there's nothing like being in the room with someone you're selling to, really understanding their process and their pain points and everything going through their head in a deeply intuitive way that machines can't really do just by reading things or reading meeting transcripts. So the three surfaces that I look at, so I'm joining a company trying to figure out, okay, this is their ICP. what's going through their head? What are they running into daily? So it's what they consume. This is newsletters, podcasts, trade press, what their competitors are posting on LinkedIn, on their own blogs, webinars that they go to online, or talks that they've seen at a conference. Everything within their industry and within their space that they're consuming. Um, to pause there really quick, this can be pretty difficult to collect, right? There's things like LinkedIn posts where Claude or ChatGPT won't be able to do that, right? They're gated walls. It's fairly easy to collect a lot of the other things. There are apps out there, like there's a thing called Amplify that will go in and scrape LinkedIn posts for, 2 cents for 1,000 posts, sorts of things. So there's ways to get around that and collect it. It's not super easy, but all the tools are now there to be able to grab all of that in, a couple of research runs. So the second surface here is what they're actually publishing, right? What are the things on their LinkedIn or on the company's page or website that they're actually putting out there? These are stage managed, they're polished, they get the talking points across, but they're usually safe. So a level deeper than that that I like to look at is like, okay, what's the actual conversation that people are having, like at the water cooler? Like obviously you can't, uh, you know, be a fly on the wall in an office. So there's other sort of proxies, whether it's on Reddit or a community board, replies in different LinkedIn's and things like that, that you can kind of start collecting to build an understanding of, okay, what are people actually saying to each other and thinking about? So, step one, you've mapped out, okay, this is the media ecosystem that our ICP is paying attention to. Every company is a media company. How do we join the conversation? Where do we go? Um, what AI has changed, obviously, this is not an original thought, but production costs are near zero. It's easy to write 10,000 words in just a one sentence prompt that takes 2 minutes. Um, you know, Production is easy now. What still holds is judgment. So the idea is that you have your thought leadership. AI looks through the past. They looked at things that we've written and understand that it does not look in the future. You as a human have that view into the future. You have an opinion of what the future looks like. That's why you're building your company. That's why you want to change the world in the way that you're operating, right? So only you retain that judgment, and that has not changed. So in figuring out what you actually want to talk about, where to insert yourself, there's sort of three gates that I pass through here. The first two are pretty easy. The last one is where it gets hard. But is anyone talking about this? Is your ICP asking these questions? Are they curious about it? Are they engaging with it? Most people get that right. Can you claim it? Can you say with authority, like, yes, I am the person in this space that can genuinely talk about this from an operator's perspective, from someone that actually does this and is an expert in this? A lot of people also pass that gate. The third one that is the most difficult is this unoccupied, right? You're looking for the sorts of topics that you can talk about credibly, that people are interested in learning about, but that only you can own. And this goes back to Joshua's exercise about, coming up with a sentence of what you do differently that's unique to you. This is sort of the same idea, but just in the things that you want to talk about. Um, so an example I like to use a lot in like this idea of just having a single thesis that everything ladders up to and flows from, right, is like Sam Altman and OpenAI, right? They have a very clear thesis that AI is changing the world. It will be make the industrial revolution look small in comparison, right? So everything they talk about, whether it's safety or AGI or new product announcements, everything comes back to that one simple thesis about what they think about the future, right? So when you figured out, okay, this is the thing that I want to talk about, this is how we'll position ourselves in the media ecosystem, find that thesis that works for you, right? It should be clear and easy to understand. Um, excuse me. From there, all of your content categories are built. So what are the natural, sort of tentpole categories that we can hit over and over that don't get boring, that can stay fresh. There's topical angles on them that kind of speak to and support that thesis. Um, with that also is the terminology that you create, right? You're creating a category. You're a category of one. What are the words? What are the phrases? What are the things that you use that you talk about that no one else does? And with GEO and SEO and stuff, this is a big part of it. It's like getting cited in OpenAI or ChatGPT or something. Like it's creating that terminology that you own, that you've created, that ladders up to your thesis is really important there. And it's also about discipline of staying on message, right? Like it's not like every piece of content should look or feel or sound the same, but it's about that everything is in support of that one thesis at the top. You say it 100 different ways, and people finally start understanding what you stand for. So that's great, but how do you productionize it, right? With all of that practice of building your understanding, building your thesis and categories and vocabulary, write it down, build a knowledge base. AI is extremely helpful here, but again, the judgment should come from you. Like this is, say you're an insurtech working on natural catastrophe exposed property, right? Like you can talk about engineering in a way that no one else can. That's a great category that flows from your thesis. So figure those things out, write them down, and keep humans in the loop. So number three is how do you actually distribute, right? Like you've figured out where the white space is, you figured out what you want to say. So how do you actually go and get that message out into the world? So one thing AI has changed here is that it's pretty easy to atomize a piece of content if you shoot or take this webinar, for instance, right? We're recording this, we could pretty easily cut this down into 80 different pieces to spread on LinkedIn and social media. Like that's part is easy. The part that has not changed though is that distribution is still king, right? If you have great pieces of content that you don't publish anywhere, it doesn't matter. If you have one thing that you actually publish and get out there and people read it, that's what actually changes things. Um, just to really quickly kind of touch on channel strategy here. Obviously, there's a lot of different places to publish content. I want to just break them down into kind of three different categories. And these categories too are agnostic to the medium itself. So each of these fit with text-based pieces of media or videos or audio. Um, so yeah, the three really core ones are what you own, right? This is your company blog or website, places where you have complete ownership of it. It's public, it's citable, uh, it can be indexed. And like I said earlier about the, sort of vocabulary and glossary that you own, like a lot of AI tools don't scrape LinkedIn, right? They've cut them off. Your website, they can scrape. So if you're building the terminology and creating the category there, like LinkedIn can be great to call people back to that and have another place where you can drive that. But really like the core of your arguments and overall media play, like this is the most important to have the own channel. Because with a feed like LinkedIn or YouTube or wherever your ICP is, like you don't control that. You can be getting great engagement one day and be throttled the next day. There's changes that go on all the time. Obviously, really important to keep this up because it's a great place for people to discover what your business or your product or your service does, how it helps them. But you don't own it, and it's not something that's going to get you referenced in ChatGPT, right? And then there's the third piece here. If you're thinking about people coming to your website, it's how do you push information to them? And this is like an RSS feed. This is an email or a newsletter. I mean, they're slightly owned here. You think about something like Substack, but overall, like you have a direct relationship with the people that are consuming your media, and you can take that from provider to different providers, and you actually have a way of getting in front of people that maybe haven't thought about going to your website or aren't scrolling LinkedIn to see a blog post that you put. So this is a great way to actually push content out and get in front of people. And yeah, just like I said earlier, like models cite pages, they don't cite posts. So making sure that your real category creation, the terms that you're entering into the universe and what you're building, like should be on own channels that are public and indexed. I want to talk about measurement here. You know, traditionally, a lot of people think about engagement as being measurement, right? This post got 1,000 views, the other one did 500. Let's double down on this, right? Which is not always the best way of looking at things. So, you have an idea about, you've gone through this exercise. These are the types of things we want to post. Only we can do this. So we'll test with X pieces over this time frame and see if it's working. So how do you see if it's working or not? Uh, the more important part for engagement is figuring out kind of who's actually engaging with it. 1,000 views is great, but 5 reads from someone that you're trying to sell to is in your ICP is way more important, right, than someone that is not even remotely close to being a buyer seeing it. So it's really figuring out like, okay, who specifically is this reaching and are they important? And then looking at the depth of how they're engaging, right? Like a like is great, a uh, comment is better if they're saying something thoughtful or even disagreeing with your point and they have a new point. Sharing inbound DMs of like, oh, I want to write for your blog. I want to be on your podcast, things like that. And then, sort of the downstream bigger ones, like you're in a sales call is someone mentioning a piece of content that you wrote. Can you see if it's having a material impact on the sales that you're making? Right. So these are all in different time frames. That real, okay, you can see this is changing inbound and it's making sales. That takes a long time to build and that compounds over time. But say in the first couple of weeks, you can get those proxy signals to figure out if you're going the right way or not. Is this person engaging? Wow, we got a like from this person that we haven't been able to reach on email. So I guess the overall here, focus less on the vanity metrics of views and impressions, right? And focus more on the quality that sits behind those. So just to wrap things up here, yeah, that's kind of the playbook is figuring out, okay, what is the conversation going on right now? How do I insert myself into that conversation in a thoughtful, original way? And how do I amplify my voice so people actually pay attention? Um, 3 pitfalls to avoid that I just want to just put the bow on because I've talked through them already, but the topic is your targeting. That's the most important thing that you have control over in content marketing. Don't pick it based on intuition. Really do your research, really understand what the space is and how you fit in. Um, don't outsource judgment. AI is amazing for content production. It can help speed up so many parts of the process. But the one thing that you should definitely retain is judgment. Um, and then finally, yeah, it's a different cadence, right? So these things with content marketing, it takes a lot more time to start seeing the impact of it. Don't measure it in the same way you might an email campaign, where you can see pretty quickly what's working or not. Realize that this takes time, really commit to the process, and you will see over time that starting to compound and pay dividends later on. So with that, maybe we will open it up to questions that anybody has.
Great. Thank you so much, Josh and Caleb, for walking us through. I have the benefit of getting to work with both of you, so I know that you two are experts in this space, but it's great to be able to share this with our network. And so just thank you for all of that. We do have a question in the chat. If anyone else has other questions for Joshua or Caleb, feel free to drop them in there. But just to get us started, someone asked, how might you adapt this framework for a marketplace business, specifically for you, Joshua, but Also, Caleb, if you have any thoughts on how this might work in a marketplace setting as well, feel free to chime in.
Yeah. So as a marketplace business, you've got one of the most difficult problems in zero to one, which is the chicken and egg problem. And, thinking about the value proposition and everything I was demonstrating before, ultimately, there's kind of no way around it other than to do two in your particular case, because you've got two sides of the business. And I think what you have to think about is with the marketplace business, side which of those ICPs of the two that you need to make it a success, um, do you need to ultimately focus on first? It is a chicken and egg problem, I understand, but I think a lot of marketplace businesses, to take examples, I don't know, for example, like a local neighborhood business where you connect locals with handymen, for example. Um, you probably want to focus on the handymen first because you can't have people come to the platform without them being there, without the service that they need to get done being there. So I think you need to do two at the same time. But I think especially in the early days, you can put more resources into one side that unlocks the other side. Just a few thoughts there.
Great. And we have another question in the chat. How do you all think about LinkedIn as a marketing channel right now? It seems to have become exceptionally noisy in terms of content.
Hmm. Yeah, I can take this one. It's a great question. Because it is, right? Like everybody's seeing LinkedIn and it's just a proliferation of uninteresting spam in a lot of ways, right? So I still think it is a very important channel. I think everything I kind of said about having original thoughts, really taking the time to understand what you're going to say and how you're going to say it, that's what really drives success on LinkedIn, right? You don't need to be posting every day. Don't need to be in everybody's comments and doing things artificially. Have some really tight framing about what you're going to say and keep saying it in different ways, keep supporting it with different evidence and publish things that are original and thoughtful and that only you can say and people will be attracted to that over time, right? And it builds slowly. There's no way to sort of hack the system here. Like yeah, you can definitely should be taking the big bets. Maybe something will go viral and it will be a crazy success, but really it's in the hard work of being diligently like building that argument, building that thesis, and doing it in a way that is authentic and genuine, right? And that's not to say that like AI is not a really important part of this. You don't have to be writing every single thing by hand, right? Like there's ways to use it that you can still get that originality across. Um, but not necessarily wordsmithing everything. But yeah, I still think it's a really important channel. It just takes time to build.
Yeah, I think I'd add something to that as well, thinking more about the kind of outbound side of things as well, which is, you know, all of the channels on the outbound side, they go through kind of phases of being more effective versus not. Email might have been effective 2 or 3 years ago. In my experience currently in this year, it's completely practically ineffective. But LinkedIn still seems to bring results for people that I've worked with, for founders. And I think one of the most interesting ways to use it, because it is a networking tool and not necessarily supposed to be a sales tool, is to use direct messages as a way to soft network. Some people, and to bring them into your orbit, some people here today may have received a LinkedIn message from one of the team members saying, "Hey, we've got a go-to-market Unlearning event. We think you might be interested in it. Come along." And if you've come from that, you might now be a little bit more interested in what we do. You're a little bit more interested in how we approach things, and you know a little more about us as well. So the next time that you're looking to solve a problem that we might be able to solve, we might be top of mind for you. But we've not gone straight in there with the sell or anything like that. We just want to bring you into our network and understand a little bit more about you as founders. So I think approaching direct messaging with that is a really good way to use LinkedIn. And in the early days, again, to test especially if you're looking across multiple ICPs and not quite sure who your decision maker is, because of the limitations of LinkedIn, and you can only really send 125 direct messages a week per account. It's kind of a blessing in disguise because what you can do is you can run 125 messages to a particular type of ICP and not necessarily look for who's converting later down the funnel, but who's replying, who's engaging with what you're doing ultimately. And if you can see one is giving you more engagement than the other, you can start to look at focusing a little bit more on that area, starting to tailor your content on the outbound, on the inbound side, and everything else that you're doing towards the ICP, because you're starting to see, a little bit of a niche forming and understanding where your business can actually get their initial clients as well.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. I think that was all the questions that we had in the chat. So I'll say again, thank you so much, Joshua and Caleb, for joining us today and walking us through our third summer school session, Unlearning Go-to-Market. Hopefully everyone in the room has some great takeaways from today. And just a moment of appreciation for all of you joining us for this last 45 minutes, taking some time out of your day to hear from our team and what we've been working on. Thank you all so much, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon.